On this AVNation special, we sit down with Henry Clifford, CEO of Livewire, and talk to him about how he got started in the business, the importance of remote support for integrators, and how to just think about business management for you and your company. All that and more next on this AVNation special.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is an AVNation special, a conversation with Henry Clifford. This is an AVNation special. I am your host, Mitchell Toulin, and we are here just to have a nice conversation with a friend that is pretty familiar to you if you've seen a show like Resi Week. He's shown up a few times, either talking about stories that we have on the hand or writing them himself. He also has his hands on remote support for integrators in the residential space. And if you haven't figured it out yet, or read the title, I am talking about Livewire CEO Henry Clifford. Henry, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Mitch. Thanks for having me. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, thanks for being here. To start, I guess we should go to the top and ask you how you started in the AV industry. But I want to preface it a little bit that in my experience, people don't really choose AV. It kind of chooses them. They seem to fall into it more often than not. So do you have a similar experience, or did you actually say, oh, I want to join the AV industry?
I think it's probably a combination of passion and psychological warfare from an early age. I grew up with a grandfather and various aunts and uncles and so forth who were all heavy into the electrical engineering field. So my grandfather worked on a precursor to the printed circuit board called multi-wire. He worked on color TV, worked on radar, and instead of playing shuffleboard, he was always soldering or working on some kind of Heathkit little gadget. So going to his house as a kid, I was sort of thrown into this world of really cool gadgets everywhere. And he was super passionate about sound. And so I can even remember from an early age, he had digital delays on his audio gear and was obsessed with telling me about the different types of audio fidelity and why it was important, why good sound was important. I remember even really, really early on seeing early versions of compact discs at his house before they had even they're on sale in the U.S. Early examples of gear from Japan that we'd never seen in the U.S. And so that kind of began the I'd call it the drug addiction around technology from an early age. And from there, I started taking gear apart physically, just taking it apart and putting it back together. And of course, you got all those spare parts left over, and then nothing works. And so I was really good at sort of destroying gear, and then
eventually got better at putting it back together.
Yeah, eventually. And so that kind of progressed. And then I always had really cool stereo setups from an early age, either built my own or went to Radio Shack. That moved into, when I bought my first car, I think I kind of put in a Crutchfield system and turned on the radio and the windshield wipers came on. And again, just learning through failure. And so this is my kind of my childhood of screwing around with technology, and kind of mended or melded in with a passion for selling. And so on the school bus, I was always selling something. So whether it was blow pops or gum or, I always had some kind of little side hustle going. So I think the two were bound to sort of meet up at some point. And so this technology passion and the sales passion kind of blended together. I think finally after I was in undergrad and I had a work study job. I needed to sort of help put myself through school, and really at that point I wanted to know how much the highest paid student worker on campus made, and it was something to do with technology. And so and at that point I think it was building websites. So I learned how to do that, and really became pretty good with information technology, computers and networking and so forth. And I still had all this kind of passion for sound and technology and all the above. Little did I know that those elements would sort of converge later on in my career as well. Fast forward again, I'm in undergrad. My little passion for computers has now evolved. I've got a consulting business, and making a pretty decent living for a 19, 20-year-old. And again, graduate and take my consulting practice down to Richmond, Virginia, where I move in with my then girlfriend, now wife. And 9/11 hits, and quickly my website building skills became sort of less and less relevant. I think the word's disintermediated. And at the same time bought a house and looked around for somebody to come and put cool technology in the house, because I still wanted that. Had never gone away. And two folks I think showed up in my orbit. One guy had some missing teeth and kind of scared my wife, and then another guy didn't want to talk to me unless I had $100,000 to spend, and he was sort of too cool for school. So I thought, nobody's taking kind of a consulting or professional services approach to this space. Why don't I give it a go? And so I told my friends excitedly, I think I shared with my wife, I'm going to start this smart home company. And they all looked at me like I was crazy. They said, well, don't you have to like drill holes in people's houses, and you have to have licenses and things for that sort of thing? I'm like, yeah, we'll figure it out. So we figured it out. And I think right around that time I was in a physical fitness program, a workout program with a home builder. And he said, man, I've just been left high and dry by the electrician. They said they'd finish, and then there's just a bunch of wires hanging everywhere in the crawl space. And I think I said something really dumb like, oh, we do that. And next thing you know, I'm standing in this new construction home with a photo gallery I'd made out of the work I'd done at my own house, where I made my wife do the installation work. And the builder gives me the job and says, okay, great. And when you're done this one, you can do the 15 more down the street. And my eyes got really big because he said yes. And I quickly went home in my Dodge Neon and got my brother and I rousted him out of bed. And I said, come on, we got some work to do. Went to the Home Depot and rented a generator and went out to this house and proceeded to do in 2 days what I would expect one of our crews to do in about 2 hours now. But we finished the job that the builder asked us to do, and putting in speakers and wiring and all sorts of things. And that led to us, again, doing 10, 15 more houses for the guy pretty immediately. And then before too long, I had called up 2 or 3 other large builders, and in another 3 or 4 months, we were doing 300-400 homes a year using subcontracted labor. Still had my dinky little Dodge Neon, had no idea, no plan, just sort of, hey, we got work, let's do it. And this went on for a couple of years, this kind of pell-mell existence of, hey, we've got work, it's great. No sense other than the electricians at the time were doing the structured cabling in the home. And I don't think the electricians particularly enjoyed that work. The builders were just starting to see the value of installing smart home infrastructure. And so the timing was really good. This was like 2002. And so that really teed us up for the next, I call it 4 or 5 years worth of growth there, where I then was able to hire a sales guy, was able to flip some of these subcontracted installers into employees. One of the subcontracted guys, his early business lesson, ended up taking one of my largest builder customers. So learned some hard lessons in the beginning about losing control of my brand and subcontracting too much and what can happen as a result. So learned some hard lessons there, continued to grow. Then in 2006 or so, we bought a building that we turned into a design center, which we needed to do because a builder had told us that a new builder client I was trying to close had said, "Hey, we won't work with you unless you have a design center." I was like, "Oh, no problem. Let's schedule you to come visit the design center." And so I think I set the appointment maybe 4 months out. Now, at this point, keep in mind, we have no design center. And I've set this appointment now for them to visit the design center. I'm not even sure I had a piece of property in mind. So quickly hung up the phone with this appointment scheduled and found a piece of property, closed on the piece of property, and then told all of the folks involved that the visit from the builder was actually 1 month prior to the actual appointment, in the spirit of manufacturing crisis and burning the ships. And we got to work. So my mother-in-law, God bless her, helped with the design, and I called in every chit I could from all these different manufacturers. And every vendor that came over, I'd have our guys like stack all of the gear from their, like the on-cue guy came over, so I'd have a chair sitting in a room with all the on-cue stuff like we could muster sitting there sort of around me, so like I was Father Christmas or something. And I was just looking back on it, it's just ridiculous, like why anybody said yes to anything, but they did, and it worked out. And then so that continues on, and that's 06, that's 07. And then in 2008, something fun happened where the entire world blew up, and I didn't hear a nail gun or any sort of building taking place for a long time. And I can remember that we closed the deal. It was a multifamily deal. It was worth quite a bit of money. And without that deal, we would have been just dead. And so luckily we had that to get us through, but we had to let people go during the recession, the Great Recession, pay cuts. I mean, it was terrible. And I said, I never want to end up in this situation again. I never want to be chasing cash. I never want to have to worry about this. And at that time, we had a little bit of security monitoring revenue coming in, but not much other, what I would call passive income or service revenue. And so at the time, I wouldn't have said, hey, this is a precursor to what came later, but I can remember just feeling really, really over a barrel at the notion of chasing cash like we were with all this project work. We then started in 2011 acquiring competitors. And so we began in 2011 by acquiring a company called Home Media, which was owned by a guy named Ray Lepper. He used to be a chairman of the CEDIA board. Really great guy. Was at that point the sort of largest player in the market. So sort of a David buying Goliath kind of moment. And so that really legitimized us in the market. And then in the succeeding years, we acquired another 5 integrators locally in the market. In 2015, we then launched our commercial division, Livewire for Business. In 2016, 2017, I got together with Greg Simmons and Ted Bremenkamp, and we created Parasol, 24/7 remote support for integrators by integrators, where we stood up what's now the largest 24/7 remote support company in our industry, handling remote support for not only our own customers, but integrators' customers in the US, UK, Canada, where they can call, text, email, chat anytime, day or night, and we'll take care of their issues. And we proactively monitor their systems so that we can keep small issues from turning into big problems. But again, that was just born of frustration, born of necessity. It was something that we needed at Livewire, and found some other friends in the industry who felt the same way and used that as a springboard to create that product, which we could never have done by ourselves. But it was very much need based. And so I've tried to stay true to that mantra of, hey, if we have a problem, is this problem universal? Is this something that not only we're experiencing an issue with, but maybe others in the industry are as well? And so a few years later, in 2019, the same thing happened. We had spent a bunch of money on building training for ourselves in-house at Livewire, creating a product called Livewire University. And we were approached by ProSource and asked if we would be able to stand that up as an industry-facing offering, which then later became what's now called ProSource University. The next year, they approached us and said, hey, this is working really well online. Could we do an in-person offering as well? And that enabled us to take one of our facilities here in Richmond and overhaul it. And that became what's called now ProSource Academy. So again, these were problems and challenges we were having at Livewire, but perceived that maybe they were industry universal problems. And so today, I continue to sort of pursue that same course of finding pain points that we're having at Livewire and saying, are these problems just Livewire problems, or are they industry problems? And if they are, hey, maybe we can, while we're fixing this problem, create something that will help our brothers and sisters out in the industry at the same time. So that's where sort of I find myself today, and I wake up every day and I love what I do. I love that this industry changes constantly. I mean, it's unrecognizable from when I started, and so I love having to reinvent, and we'll continue to do that. I'm going out of here feet first.
That's awesome. Something about the story of you trying to sell a thing before you even had the property to me is just like, I can see this in a movie. There's a montage going on of, oh, we need to put this together now kind of thing that really is amazing. I going back, I like how you said that you were kind of raised up in it. Are you trying to instill that into your children to get them into AV? Because I've also heard of the AV industry. It's kind of like the mafia, that once you're in, you can't get out. So are you, I mean, obviously you can say like, well, do what you want, but if you would kind of like nudge them and say, hey, check out all this cool stuff, just like you were.
Yeah, so I have 3 kids. My son Will is 16, my daughter Quinn is 14, and then my daughter Emily's 10. And none of them have really sort of kind of given me the sense that they're super into this stuff at all, which candidly, it's fine. I mean, there's a saying, a prophet's not welcome in his own house. I mean, I think to some extent, like they're into their own things. It wouldn't surprise me that at some point, maybe they circle back and they're interested in working in the business. If they are, great. If they're not, I just want them to be happy and do whatever it is that they're going to do and just try their best at it. But yeah, I think, do I try to kind of inject my tech stuff into them? Yes. And you can tell that because your kids are always a great humbling barometer or sort of litmus test as to whatever sort of line of stuff that you're stating. They feed it right back to you in a very snarky way. So I can tell that they're hearing the rhetoric, whether they're internalizing it and as like a business nerd would say, like operationalizing it. I think they're teenagers right now, and who the heck knows, but I think they're happy, and I just want them to be happy. And I'll continue the drumbeat of tech, this sort of tech psychological warfare, because our house, as you can imagine, is like a constant testing ground full of shiny objects where, as I like to say, nothing ever works. So I mean, it's just, you know, but it's sort of it's universal, and the best thing I can do, I think, is meet them where on their level. Like if they're like gaming, I'll say, well, isn't it nice that you have this playroom where you can game on your little 4K TV that's like 5 million inches, across, etc. So, and I'll get a, yeah. So,
Yeah, no, I can kind of understand that because, like, I mean, I grew up, and it's definitely dating myself, but not enough. But I did grow up with like a dial up at one point. We did switch to broadband eventually, but I think right now, with like my nieces and nephews, they're growing up with tablets and stuff. Technology like this is just kind of there, and there's like it's whatever. When you kind of pull back and go, wait, how do you get this signal to this thing? How do you get this one thing to do whatever you want it to? Is then the layers fall like, go, oh wait, people do this for that's and that. I mean, that was what I was interested in AV when I started here was oh, there's an entire world, and then once you see it, you can't get out. So if anything, we keep that knowledge hidden.
well, it's interesting you say that too, Mitch, because I would say that my observation of my kids, sort of generation, and I'm going to sound like my dad, is they're good users of the tech, like they're consumers of it, but I don't see as much curiosity about how it works because to some extent it's gotten out of the way. Like it doesn't beg the question of how it works as much anymore because it just does work. It's like a toaster. And so I feel like, certainly when I was a kid, I saw this stuff, um, before. I mean, I grew up in a world where there were no cell phones, where it was just there was no internet. There was none. So I saw this kind of happening, and so I wanted to know how it works. So I think there'll always be that group that does, because I mean, on the flip side, I know plenty of my buddies and their kids, and they're into like coding and STEAM and robotics and all that sort of thing, and into just things that, blow my mind. So thank goodness, and hopefully that translates into us continuing to come out with cool shiny objects down the road.
Speaking of cool things, the way that I've been looking at just some the Parasol stuff and Livewire and remote support, and how I always find it fascinating that we just had an internet problem yesterday, getting connected on and talking to the people and say, hey, we'll just reset your router now. And sure enough, the router just starts to blink and do its thing. And I'm like, that's awesome. Slightly terrifying, but amazing. So when it comes to something like that, because I've seen on Parasol, I love that one of the statistics you have is like headaches avoided, and calls not during dinner. So what makes a good support system for an integrator?
Well, we took the approach that, I mean, ultimately as a group, I feel like there's reactance with integrators as an audience, right? This is a group that doesn't really like being told what to do. In fact, like you tell them up, their default reaction is down, and that's fine. I mean, it takes, I think, a special set of characteristics to sort of launch out and start a business, etc. So we knew that when we started, we didn't want to be too sort of heavy-handed with um, the way we required the systems to be configured. So we'd said, hey, look, all you need to start is an Oversea Pro Hub, which is pretty simple piece of gear that Snap One sells, and they don't charge a subscription for the service. So we thought, okay, this is a good place to start. So that's your baseline. From there, we want to see the gear labeled using uh, a certain labeling system, which is developed by my partner Ted. We call it Blueprint. But we knew that if we were ever going to be able to cater to a group of folks who are installing Crestron and Savant and Control 4 and Elan or Nice or whatever, etc., all these disparate systems out there, and the unifying factor was they're all network connected, that we had to have a common language. and we had to have an easy way to sort of allow our technical support folks to easily kind of move from one to the other. So that's how we did it, and including the connectivity. So, for example, Mitch, if in your scenario yesterday, one of our support agents be able to say, okay, well, there's his router, it's labeled here, boop, boop, there, I can reach it. Or even better, you've got an app and you just take out the app and you can kind of reboot it yourself potentially. But but the theme there, or the important piece, is that we kind of set some loose bumper lanes, because what we'd seen before was that these solutions that had come out prior, which was like super tight bumper lanes where they required a bunch of TPS reports and sort of a bunch of paperwork and things that it just didn't fly. You need something nimble. You need something an installer can just go out, boom, put in an Oversee Pro Hub, or even activate the Oversee Pro Hub functionality in a Control4 system or in some of the other gear that has Oversee Pro Hub capabilities. And then that system can be monitored. But it's just like anything else, garbage in, garbage out. So as long as you've got some way to monitor it, Oversee Pro Hub, and then a commitment to label it in a way that somebody coming along behind you can understand that it's an Apple TV versus labeling it outlet 1, then we're set up for success. And that's why when we commission a system, bring it online, we're sort of doing a gut check where the installer calls in and says, I'm ready. I'm all set, ready to turn it over to you guys. And we're like, oh yeah, cool. Like, let's take a look. And most of the time it's great. But when you're first getting going with it, and you're really not catching necessarily bad parasol behavior. You're kind of arresting like bad habits, period. And so that's why a lot of the owners who sign on and become dealers love it, because it's like a trust but verify kind of deal. And trust but verify is wonderful because, I mean, anybody knows running an integration business, like you cannot check every single one of your installs the way you want to and the way you could when it was just you at the beginning. But with something like Parasol acting as kind of a compliance mechanism, I mean, that right there is worth the price of admission.
That's awesome. So in addition to your Parasol and Livewire activities, you also do a lot of writing, usually about the industry. We actually pick a lot of stories from it, usually because I'm the guy who picks the stories, and I'm like, man, dang it, Henry's written another really interesting article, and it's always something that can sprout out a conversation. So just honestly, where does this come from? Are you just milling about and just kind of just thinking about how an industry, or is it just a lot of experience that you just put forth?
No, great question. I think a lot of the stand-up comics have something like nothing's off limits, or I've also heard the phrase everything is copy. And for me, everything is copy. So it doesn't matter what I'm going through or what I'm doing. Like, I'm going to write about it. Like, nothing's off limits. If I've got some issue here with an employee or some friction here, like, I'm going to write about the nasty stuff that's going on inside my own business, the great stuff that's going on. Because sometimes if I'm frustrated by it, then it writes itself. It's like therapy for me. I can just go and I can just, 5 minutes crank it out. Or for an example, yesterday, Sonos sent me their the Move 2 to look at, right, to evaluate. And one of our guys did an unboxing video of it. And then I just took it home and just set it up side by side with the old Move. And I just played it side by side. And the new one just blew my doors off compared to the old one. So boom, it just right there. My passion that I experienced, because I experienced this thing, it's like 3,000% better than the old one. I'm just going to, I got 400 words and it'll take me like 5 minutes to write that. So that's where they all come from. And or like last week, this whole AI thing had been something I've been screwing around with since last November. And I thought, hey, let's just write a quick little deal about, here's 5 little doodads that I'm using in the, 5 doodads that 5 tools that I'm using, AI tools And maybe that'll help some integrators out who are maybe struggling with the big wide world of AI and maybe getting sick of hearing about it, and they don't have a means of using it for their business.
I used to, Tim made this joke, and so I'm going to steal it shamelessly. Like, we used to ask people, 5 years from now, what do you think things are going to be like? But thanks to a certain giant earth-shattering pandemic thing, it doesn't matter. Your 5-year plans don't count for nothing. So I'm going to steal instead from a different person from our XR Star show, where she always likes to end the show asking the guest, what is your greatest hope and what is your greatest fear? And you can take either one if you want to go bad news first.
Yeah, I think my greatest hope is that we as an industry continue down this path of understanding that we are not we are not going to become disintermediated by AI or anything else, as long as we remember that we are local and that we are here to save our customers time and understand our role as sort of a trusted advisor and look to monetize those opportunities in terms of whether it's having service plans or memberships or whatever they're called as part of every single deal we do. Those that aren't doing that, who are continuing down the path of just project after project, I worry about those companies to some extent. I think there's going to be a little bit of a culling of the herd there. And then, so that's my greatest hope, is that we continue down the road of recognizing kind of who we are and who we aren't. And then my biggest fear would be that we become calcified, which sounds strange. We're supposed to be technologists, but that we stop embracing change as quickly as maybe we should, because it's now happening. It was already happening at an accelerative pace. And now that rate of acceleration or that rate of transformation is stair-stepping more and more and more. And so because of those elements, I would say that my biggest fear is that there's maybe a lot of us who might not be recognizing how fast the environment is changing right now and might be reactively pivoting too late, which tags back to just changing our business models to being more service focused, which, I would not claim to be an original idea necessarily, as much as inspired by a presentation I saw at CEDIA. The keynote talked about the integrator of 2027, sort of 4-year look, sort of long view, where this futurist and then great folks like Rich Green and Gordon Van Zuyden and a few of these other folks weighed in on that. Those are some really smart people who I respect a lot. So I tend to sort of orient my ship or my compass towards sort of macro messaging like that.
All right, that's awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. How can we find you for any of your writing purposes, or Livewire, or even Parasol?
At Get Livewire. I'm on all sorts of social media, etc. And yeah, any questions, comments, etc. I love it, and I love talking to folks in our industry. It's how I learn.
Thank you so much. For me, don't follow me. I mean, I do write. It's stuff like this. This is like the only physical copy in existence. Definitely not about the AV industry. Instead, if you want more of that, go to AVNation.tv, where you get shows like Resi Week, like AV Week, coverage of shows like CEDIA Expo 2023. When you're on the website, check out those underwriters. Those are the ones that support us and let us go to shows and let us do shows. And we thank them for that. That's all the time we have for this AVNation special.